Yeah, no, definitely. It's let me read that. What's going on, guys? We'll be getting started in just a second. Let's put on some cool tavern music. What do we got? I like that one better. Alright, copy this link. Oh. Forgot you could hear my sound. Alright. Okay, commands. Alright, we're gonna be what's going on, guys? We'll be starting in 1 second. Just adjusting some tech stuff last minute. Hello, Pixie Geek. What's going on, man? Hello, SG Bent. If you guys want to, you can hit that retweet link. Let everyone know you're hanging out with us, because it is the best way to hang out. Alright, I'm going to switch over right now. Turn that down. What is going on, guys? We are officially live, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Fuzzy Dice Show here on the Exploding Dice channel. Of course, Fuzzy Dice is your Dungeon Master show here live every Tuesday, hanging out with you, talking about Dungeon Master topics, sharing awesome guests with you, and, you know, just having a good old time. Before I introduce my guest and I tell you how awesome of a show we have for you tonight, there are a few formalities we gotta get through. We have to do some announcements and a weekly recap because, you know, we have news and information that you guys need to hear. Sorry, I'm getting a weird static in my ears and I don't know what it is. Turn that down a little bit. Alright, so let's start out with announcements. First of all, if you guys have not seen it, we officially started our brand new season of Dungeons & Dragons Pathfinder right here on the Exploding Dice channel. We put Jade Regent on the back burner for the time being due to scheduling issues and stuff. We didn't want the players to lose their awesome characters and those storylines. So we put that on hold, and in its place we just started Out of the Abyss. We had our first session this past Sunday, and it went fantastically well, I thought. Lots of really cool NPCs. You can see we have a new player with us. You can actually catch that in the video on demand, and it will be going up on YouTube shortly. So go ahead and check out the first episode of Out of the Abyss. It was a good time. As you can see, right down here somewhere, I don't know where I'm pointing. Right down here, I've got some little promos for upcoming stuff because I am starting a brand new campaign that I'll be DMing on the Encounter Roleplay channel, I've got Reign of Winter, a brand new 5th edition campaign starting. That's taking place on 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. It's replacing Tinker's Tale, which I was a player in, which just ended, so we'll be starting a new campaign. Come see me DM for some awesome people. I know Trainsy TV is going to be there. Will, the host from Encounter Roleplay, is going to be there, and I think his girlfriend Sydney is going to be there. It's going to be awesome. Also, I will be hosting a game on their Encounter Roleplay's 24-hour stream. That's coming up this Saturday. You can see me hosting a one-shot called Legacy of Madness, starting at 10 a.m. and going until 1 p.m. All I can tell you is there will be dragons. So come hang out. Also, just a minor mention, if you guys like comedy, you should check out my brother's podcast called Your Message Here, where I do some voiceover work as a special character called Peter Duncan on the sub-podcast, The Whole Nine Words. It's a good time. You should check it out. And thank you, J.M. Campbell, for hitting that follow button. You are awesome. And thank you for joining the madness here with Dice Thulu embracing you. So the weekly recap, I'll just speed through it. We played the first session of Out of the Abyss. The players found themselves trapped for various lengths of time in a drow outpost prison where they were stripped of all their gear. Some of them had been there longer than others. They met a cast of NPCs, crazy characters, and started planning on how they were going to escape. They were assisted by a drow who had apparently been scorned, since he is no longer the lover of the mistress of the outpost. He helped them escape, and they proceeded to attack the guard post, knock out the drow guarding the guard post, and jump out the window down into the depths, where they were caught by a net of spider webs that then dropped them into a frigid lake, where they were almost caught by a gray ooze that inhabited the lake. They made it out, and they crawled onto land and raced away as the outpost was attacked by Vrock demons, and now they're currently making their way to the Dark Lake. They have no equipment. They have only the things that they managed to grab off the drow before they jumped out the window, and they have no idea where they're going because none of them know anything about the Underdark. So it will be a crazy campaign as they make their way towards the Kuatoa town of Slubladop, which is a favorite place of mine, just because I love saying that name. So that was the first session of Slubladop. I love it. It's so good. So yeah, come hang out with us for Out of the Abyss. It's a great time. All right, so I don't want to bore you with my rambling anymore. I've got a guest sitting right on this side of me. I can't figure out the things. What is going on, Jason? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone in chat and tell us what's up? Oh shit! Give me a second. What? I thought I unmuted that. Output speakers. Try talking now.
Hello? Can y'all hear me now?
It'll take about 20 seconds before they can answer you.
Yeah, dadgum. Twitch. It's okay, I can do it again, and I'll do it right this time.
Well,
I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, we're waiting for that confirmation.
Come on, everybody. I'm staring at this chat. Tell me if you can hear me.
It's live TV. Yay!
Okay.
They got you. All right, take two.
Now, what I said was, my name is Jason Ashley. I'm the host of a podcast called Too Cool For Tabletop, where I sit down with people who have never played tabletop role-playing games and make them play them, the idea being that they will love it and learn that there is no one who is too cool for tabletop. And so far, there has been nobody who is too cool, except for my wife, who is probably a little too cool, but she still played anyway, so that's it. And I'm here to talk to Brian today about stuff.
Hopefully, is that like an ongoing quest to find the person who is in fact too cool?
No, because I don't genuinely believe they exist. Like I am not the kind of, well, let me backtrack. I was going to say I'm not the kind of person you would find playing role-playing games, but I play them a lot, so that's not true. But I don't know. I have yet to play with anybody who has ever disliked it, and I've played with lots of people, and most of them are not the kind of people who would normally do it. Like I've played with just essentially how I got started playing is I would be hanging out with friends who are not the kind of people that play tabletop games, and someone would be like, let's play D&D, and we're like, no, and then we did, and everyone loved it, so that kind of kicked off the idea in my head, you know.
Awesome. So yeah, I suspect that if perhaps we were able to time travel and you could invite the Fonzie to a game of table, he might be too cool. But anyone else?
I don't know. I really don't know, man. I was very spoiled in the realm of games like this because the first time I ever played Magic the Gathering, I was well into my mid to late 20s, and the first game I ever played, I won. And so immediately I was just like, this is the best thing in the entire world. And I had that kind of same experience with Dungeons and Dragons. I played with a bunch of people at a party, and everyone was wasted, and no one cared about playing except for me. And so then I kept bugging the guy who ran the game to play a real game, and I got hooked on it. But prior to that, I would make fun of my friends for playing Magic the Gathering and doing that sort of thing. So once I accepted that I liked it, and more than I liked it, like I loved it, like I live and breathe this shit, it was really easy to accept that there's probably no one out there that wouldn't like it. And it's storytelling. Everybody likes a good story. Everyone likes compelling characters. So if you are telling a good story with compelling characters, who out there is not going to want to be a part of it, you know?
No, I definitely agree. By the way, can I make a confession that I was introduced to tabletop games back when I was young. I was probably 11. And my friend brought in his dad's Warhammer 40K catalog.
That's a pretty brutal way to start playing.
And yeah, and he gave me a copy of it, and I was a big nerd even as a kid, and so I started I got my own 3rd edition catalog, and I brought it around school, and everyone I showed it to was like, man, that looks really cool. But I mean, we're all kids think it's whatever.
Everything is cool when you're a kid. Your parents are cool when you're a kid. That tells you a lot.
No, it was I'm grateful for the fact that I was sort of encouraged to get into gaming young, and it's it was a big part of my life growing up. Warhammer in particular, but no, I agree. Like everyone I've met, save maybe my brother, because I think he's too apathetic for it, but I believe if I could get him to play a tabletop game, he would probably enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a stigma around it, and I feel like that stigma is much lessened now because we live in the dawn of a new Star Wars movie every year. Marvel movies are the highest grossing movies that come out. I mean, we live in a time where this stuff is okay to be cool. But, when I was in high school, that was not cool.
Oh, no, definitely.
But it wasn't cool to the point that even I thought it wasn't cool, and I was not cool in high school. I was the kid in Limp Bizkit t-shirts that the regular people made fun of, and even I was like, Dungeons and Dragons, that's for nerds,
I think everyone kind of has their own sort of perceptions of things. There were, we were me and my group of friends were definitely nerds, but there were also other nerds who were like, man, I'll play video games all night. This was back in, this was Ultima Online era, and they're like, but I wouldn't play a game of D&D. That's for losers.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I feel like nerd has several tiers to it, and it's not even a bad word anymore. Like geek and nerd, like there's entire companies that, yes, Sean, I did it all for the nookie. Thank you. And I took that cookie and I stuck it up my but I mean, I have this theory, and I've said this on another podcast before that I was a guest on called the Everything is Awesome podcast with my buddy Kevin. But he kind of asked for my story, how I got into D&D, and it really kind of fits these different levels of nerdiness because younger, I played video games. Like I had the original Nintendo NES, I had the Super Nintendo. Like I would play video games all day and all night. And then I went off to college, came back to my hometown, and then I stayed there for a while. And I kept running into a bunch of people, a bunch of friends of mine, and I'm like, hey, let's go have a drink on Friday. Let's go do something on Friday. Oh, we're playing Magic the Gathering. We're playing Magic the Gathering. And I was like, a bunch of fucking nerds. I'm not going to play Magic the Gathering with you guys. There's no way. And so I got tired of spending my Fridays by myself, so I went to a comic shop, bought a starter kit, a little starter pack, and played Magic the Gathering. And suddenly I was into it, man. I was going to card shops and dropping $100 a week buying different cards to put these decks together. And it got too expensive and it got boring because it was just everyone trying to, outpiss the other person. So one day someone made the joke, what are we going to do next? Play Dungeons and Dragons. Cut to a month in the future and we're all playing Dungeons and Dragons. And after we've been playing that for a month, and my first experience with Dungeons and Dragons, which is funny to me because I was probably in my mid-20s, I guess, when I started playing, and we would show up at my friend's house at about 8 p.m. and play until like 5 in the morning, and then everyone would go to work and then have miserable days at work. But we'd do it like 4 days a week. Like, I don't know how none of us just died from exhaustion during that time period. But I had made the comment to them. I was like, I feel like we're on this natural progression. I feel like it starts with video games, and then it goes into like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, whatever your poison is. And then you step up into role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. The next step is going to be LARPing, and then after that, we all have to become serial killers. I feel like that's just that's all where it goes.
It's all tangential, right? Like you can't talk about video games with other nerds and not have someone and not have someone bring up comic books, and then you can't talk about comic books without someone talking about like the dude, sharing the story about I was talking about this with the guy in my D&D group, and it's like you're always going to be tangential to it, so.
Well, one nerdy thing informs the other nerdy thing, and I think that's, I always heard as a kid, and you still hear now, this joke about the nerdy kids getting picked on by the jocks. Well, when the jocks grow up, they're going to be working for the nerdy kids. Like, that's the running gag. And I feel like that's how the world has become now. All these nerdy kids who like this nerdy stuff are now in charge of things. You have J.J. Abrams, who was this dweeby kid. Now he's making Star Wars and Star Trek. You have Kevin Feige, who was probably just a little kid who loved Spider-Man, and now he is in charge of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, you have all these people that were these dorky kids who probably got picked on, and now they're in charge of everything. They're in charge of the media that we consume as a mass. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, I trust me, I'm with you. It's been a weird cultural shift. It's kind of been weird seeing all the things that I liked it as a kid now just become like, everyone, people are wearing like D&D t-shirts, and I'm like, really? Is that a thing you can do now?
Yeah, there's multiple websites that sell them. It's crazy. It's not some obscure thing you have to go find anymore. You can find it on like Etsy, the things that your grandma goes on to learn how to like knit a doily, and on that same page there's a D&D t-shirt you can buy.
So, one thing I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about is I know you've got your podcast, and it's primarily about sort of introducing or playing D&D with people who I guess formerly were non-D&D players. Now I'm sure they are just as much a part of the community as anyone else. Has that really, like, how have you approached that from a dungeon master's perspective, or someone who's kind of like, how do you find you go about introducing people to the hobby?
Well, I think like we did a pilot episode, which was my wife had a friend from out of town who was going to stay with us one night on her way to somewhere else, and this friend of mine I knew, decently well, and we both would nerd out about TV shows and stuff together. And I had this idea. This is right about the time I decided I should do a podcast. And I was like, well, hey, she's going to be here. I'll get my wife. I'll get my buddy James. They'll come over. James, by the way, is the co-host of my podcast now. They all came over. We set up a mic in the middle of the room, and I had just gotten the Fantasy Age system, and I had been reading up, and I wanted to play it. So the first thing we do, our first pilot episode is a pure dungeon crawl, and everybody hates it. When it's over, my wife did not like it. Her friend wasn't a big fan. James, who had played many other sessions of Dungeon World with me, was very disinterested when it was all said and done. So immediately I learned that the way to introduce people to this game, or to gaming like this in general, is not with a dungeon crawl, not with something mechanics heavy, not something that it's all about, let me look this rule up, let me look this rule up. So we primarily stuck with Dungeon World, which if you have not played it, is extraordinarily fiction heavy. It's all about the narrative, the rules just serve the story. And so after that, we started sitting down with people, and we would play something like Dungeon World. We also played Lasers and Feelings by John Harper, which is an amazing game. It's another sort of big story, narrative, character-based game. And we started delving into who these characters were. Instead of me saying, all right, you're an elf ranger, you're in the dungeon, what do you do? It's, you're an elf ranger, tell me about your childhood. Was your dad mean to you? What's your best friend's name? Have you ever had a dog? We started going into these sort of things where the people playing could have some sort of connection with their character. They had some idea of who they were in relation to our story. So then it didn't matter if we were doing a dungeon crawl. They knew who they were. They weren't looking at a sheet and looking for which move is the best move for this scenario. They were like, what would my character do? You know, and I think that made a big difference. They felt like they had some personal connection to who they were playing, and that opened it up for everybody. And I think that has been the key into converting people over to players.
Yeah, I definitely sympathize a lot with sort of the methodology. When I started, I don't want to say when I started. When I became a DM originally, and we're going back a couple of years now. I had been through a couple DMs that they always did things that kind of bugged me, and my original impetus was, man, I could do better than this. So I started doing it, but I wasn't really getting what I wanted out of games. Like I could run a game. Anyone can run a dungeon crawl, and you can guide players through. Going and killing a dragon and saving the town.
That's literally what our dungeon crawl was, by the way.
Yeah,
literally that's what it was.
Was it the Pathfinder beginner box?
No, it was just some quick thing I put together with that Fantasy Age deal. I just was here's the stats for a dragon. He's in a cave. There's a town nearby. Go kill him. Like it was the easiest thing to put together very quickly.
Yeah, no, I get you, and it's but it's one of those things where I realized like I could do this easily. This doesn't take any effort, but I'm not getting what I want out of it because the players aren't really. They're not giving me anything back. Like they're not getting as into characters I was hoping they were, and so I started looking around to the way other people did things, and early on there were a couple methods I had sort of adopted, and one of them primarily was this one that we were talking about, my Friday, my Crimson Throne game. One of the things I think informed that game is when the players started, obviously we talked a lot about the setting, and specifically what their lives were like kind of growing up in this city, because the campaign takes place almost entirely within one major city. So they're locals, they've grown up here, things have affected them and whatnot. But one of the things that I did was I was like, so I want you to tell me about, make up some NPCs, some people that your character knows, maybe a tavern that he's a local at where people know his name, or I don't know, something. And so we created these what the hell did I call them? We created these like connections for the player just around.
Well, it sounds exactly like Dungeon World. They're called bonds. You establish bonds between characters, and once that's done, you do it in like 5 minutes. It builds a whole story around these people you just made. Yeah,
it's one of the things, and I mean we play Pathfinder only, well, because it's just the thing we've been playing. Like, and
Sure.
I don't have much luck telling people to change systems, so I just run any kind of thing that involves like adding more narrative to the game that another system may do. I usually just cut out and stick it onto the Pathfinder system that I'm already running.
It's funny because 5th edition pretty much took a D&D 5th edition, well, obviously, took like a lot of these ideas that Dungeon World and Apocalypse World before it kind of introduced, these narrative aspects. Like when you make a character in D&D 5th edition now, you determine their backstory and there's rules for doing it. Like that's pretty unheard of in D&D.
Yeah, and I certainly, like, that's one of the things about 5th edition that I think is pretty cool. It's one of the aspects that I sometimes try and incorporate. Obviously, like, my players like Pathfinder only because they like the character building options.
Sure.
They like playing around with mechanics, and taking little fiddly bits to build a unique character. But I definitely, like, these days I try and focus a lot on, like, one of the things, and I don't know if you've ever tried this, but one of the things that I started doing, which is kind of a staple of how I run things now, is the first thing I do when we start a campaign is I always ask the players, regardless of how much experience they have, I ask them, like, so tell me about where you, like, this character's level 1. You haven't started the campaign yet. Where do you see this character going? Like, what do you see? What are his goals? What do you see this character's character arc as?
Like, what is this character's long-term goal? What is their life goal? And what is a short-term goal? You know, does this character want to go find out what happened to his long-lost brother who disappeared 10 years ago? And is the short-term goal that he wants to find a weapon powerful enough to defeat an enemy he fought when he was younger? Like, stuff like that. I definitely agree. I'd love doing that sort of thing.
And then the interesting thing is, because obviously, the reason I asked that, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is because everyone, when they build a character, they kind of have a picture of what this character looks like at the end of the campaign, decked out in his awesome gear and spouting a cool catchphrase or whatever, doing the thing that he was built to do. But the problem is those ideas are always formed absent of whatever's going to happen in the campaign. So what's always interesting is I like to go back to that player and, like, let's say at level 5 and level 10 and stuff, and say, okay, so now your character has been through some stuff. Stuff has happened, events that you couldn't foresee, you couldn't plan for, they've met people, whatever. Are their priorities still the same?
Exactly.
How, like, does your character still want the same things he wanted at level 1? Or has his perspective shifted?
Well, it's more or less which is great because you're asking them, like, how has your character matured and grown and changed over the course of the story? Which I feel like if they don't do it, if your character is the same character at the end and at the beginning, unless that was a very conscious decision, it kind of means that maybe the two of you, the DM and the player, are playing two different games.
Yeah, and that's why I like asking it specifically, because one of the things that is kind of big for me is I love asking players questions about their character that they probably never considered.
Have you ever played Dungeon World? Because you are describing everything Dungeon World is about, man.
I know of it. I think I've read the book, but I've never played in it or DM'd it.
Like, one of the main rules for the Dungeon Master is ask questions, use answers. Like, that's all you do the whole time. Like, if one character does something that you think as the Dungeon Master the other character might be upset about, you're like, hey, character, aren't you pissed that they did this? And they're like, yeah, I am. I'm like, cool, y'all should go talk about it. Like, it's very much asking questions, and in doing so, you're putting ideas in their head, and their answers give you information to go on. But it's seriously a fantastic system. The reason I essentially, yes, Burning Wheel, fantastic, Fix-It Geek. Burning Wheel is another one in that ballpark. I believe they're both based on the Apocalypse World system. But
yeah, I talked a lot about it, Burning Wheel with was it Crits and Giggles? I don't remember. One of my past episodes, one of my players came here. Their podcast was Burning Wheel, and so we talked a lot about it.
I haven't really looked into it yet, but I know Adam Coble, who is the guy who wrote Dungeon World, is a big fan of it. He talks about it a lot on Twitter. So I would assume it's probably in that ballpark of the same system. But I don't know. The thing that I like, whenever we switched in our podcast from doing primarily Dungeon World for our sword and sorcery sort of games to 5th edition of D&D, it was because while I do like the cinematic storytelling way that Dungeon World works, I was missing a little bit of the crunchiness. Like, there's not stuff like two characters are arguing. Well, in D&D, you're like, cool, you roll for insight, you roll for charisma. Dungeon World, you just let it happen, and it's up to what actually is said by these people that determines what the outcome is.
Yeah.
So sometimes that can lead to stalls, and there's times where it's kind of hard to GM the game, but not always.
Especially because when you're just basically going on what how the players role play, it might be hard to actually pick which one you favor. Because they're both players, and if they're both playing their character, like, which one is it more convincing to you, or would it be more convincing to the NPC? It's a weird dichotomy.
It is weird, yeah.
I like Pathfinder in a lot of, like, I find it's a broken system. I have no problems admitting that. There are a lot of things that need fixing, but there are a lot of interesting things about it too. Specifically in how much stuff has been published for it. And I remember we were doing the Jade Region campaign, and one of the players had died, and they actually wanted to resurrect this character in some way. Now, the players were level 2, so they really didn't have any means to do that. But they had this occult tome that they couldn't read because it was in a weird language. And so they used an NPC who could read it, and they were like, is there anything in here that could help us? And so here's a spoiler. Even though I work as an artist and as a dungeon master a lot, I'm not a creative person. So when I'm thinking about, like, shit, now I have to create a whole kind of complex ritual that these players are gonna have to role play out, and it's got to seem dramatic, and it's got to seem tense, and it's got to have enough fiddly bits that it doesn't feel like they're just rolling a d20 to see if they resurrect a guy. Yeah. How am I going to create this? And so I started statting one out, and I'm like, wait, wasn't there an occult book for Pathfinder that just came out? And I went to look for it, and surprise, not only does it have the exact tome that they have in-game statted out in this book, but there are actually rituals pre-written, and they have multiple steps, and they have all these different things, ways that the players can affect it. And so it's like, the fact that there is that kind of, for the system, there is that kind of stuff that I can just go onto the SRD and be like, are there rules for two players having an argument? Why, yes, someone has written them, and they're right here.
Well, see, and while that is cool, I definitely agree. It's awesome for that level of depth with mechanics to have that sort of thing exist. That is a shining example of why I would prefer, personally, a system like Dungeon World, because once someone said, hey, I want to perform this ritual to bring this character back to life, I would just look at them and be like, okay, what is this ritual like? What does it look like? What do you have to do? What are the processes? I would make them come up with it, and as they come up with it, you ask questions about that. Oh, well, we have to burn a pound of human hair. I'd be like, why? Why human hair? What's the difference? Why can't it be animal hair? And you put them on the spot, and then that just brings up all these ideas, and in the end, you essentially let them talk themselves out of doing it, or you make a quest for them that requires them to go get the things required to do this. Not that you can't do that with other systems, just something like Dungeon World is 100% designed for that, which is what I think is really fun about it.
Yeah, and I'm definitely down with that. Like, there are a lot of times I'll let players, like, it usually depends on where on the source of what it is that they're trying to do. So, like, if it, for example, was a ritual that theoretically their character would already know, then yeah, I'd probably let them write it. I'd say, like, it just probably needs to include these major. It needs to include at least 4 different steps, and some kind of magical artifact or something. But other than that, you can tell me how it works. For example, one of my players he was playing a fortune teller, and his character read people's fortunes, and there's no mechanical way for this to happen in the game.
Sure.
There's nothing written about how this works. There is a hero card thing, which I know how to do, but it wasn't what this character was doing. So he just sort of made up a way about him using a bowl of water and freezing it with ice magic that technically didn't really exist in the game to help tell people's fortunes. And that's fine. I'm perfectly fine putting that in the hands of the player. But, for example, like, if it's something that's coming out of a book that they are not, it's not created by them, it's not something that they would have the knowledge of beforehand, then it's, now it's something that I've probably got to write, and
Gotcha,
the fact that it's already there and it's already in depth, and the steps are interesting enough that I can make that a dramatic event. Like, I can make this event dramatic by including NPCs and whatnot. That just helps me out a lot, because again, I'm hardly uncreative. I work great with a design brief, but on my own I flounder a lot.
Gotcha. A little bit of guidance makes all the difference.
Outside of that, like, obviously you've got a lot of love for the Dungeon World system. Is there anything else that you find yourself? I mean, do you play in any other games? Do you are there any other campaigns or systems that you have fondness for, or maybe you don't like? I mean, everyone has their opinions on edition wars and this and that.
Well, to be perfectly honest, man, I'm probably, I don't know, I may be looked upon from by certain people as like an intruder into this world, because I'm not I cannot talk today. I am not very well versed in RPGs. I have played D&D 2.5 and 5th edition. I played Pathfinder. I played Dungeon World. I played Lady Blackbird. I've played Dread. I've played Everyone is John. I have played Dungeon World. That's all the systems I've played. Because I'm one of those people where I'm like, I found this system, I love it, I will never play anything else.
See,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, you sound like the one of the perfect types of people that I'd love to get together for a game of Big Motherfucking Crab Truckers.
Yes, I have not played that, but I have the PDF.
I do too. Oh my god!
Just because of the name alone, I was like, I should play this one day.
I have a little adventure written. None of my players want to play it because they're not interested in like they're so into
a giant crab who drives a truck. Why would you not want to play that game?
No, they're just like they balk at the idea of like a non-crunchy system. So like the fact that a system is purely role playing. For any of you who don't know, Big Motherfucking Crab Truckers is a fantastic one-page system where if you've ever played, it functions a lot like the improv game. My brother's a comedian, so we do this a lot. The sort of improv comedy game called Yes and, which is where you basically just tell an increasingly ridiculous story by adding onto it and by encouraging other people to add onto it. And Big Motherfucking Crab Truckers is a lot like that, except you basically continue to tell a story until either another player or the DM stops believing you, in which case they say, no fucking way, and then you roll to see who's right.
We actually just played my first time ever. We played a run through of Everyone is John over the weekend for a bonus episode for the podcast. And if you're not familiar with that, or those of you listening or watching are not familiar, everyone in the game plays a voice inside the head of a man named John, and you're all fighting for control of John to accomplish whatever quests or goals you've set forth. And all I know is that our game, our attempt at playing it, involved a lot of John pulling his penis out in public. At one point, he put it in some buffalo wings, and there was a lot of stealing, a lot of car thievery, and in the end, when it was all said and done, it was entertaining, but it was kind of like, I see how this is not what you think of when you think of a tabletop role-playing game. This is like the drunken stepbrother of a tabletop role-playing game, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I haven't played Everyone is John, much like I haven't played... I know a lot about Paranoia, but I've never played it myself, only because I've seen or heard other people play it, and it's one of those things where it's on my list of things that I will probably never find a group of people to hang out and play that with, because all my friends are, all the people I play with are into D&D, and, it's just, I don't have the time, to go around and be like, hey, you want to try this other weird system?
Sure. Well, by the time you've got everyone together to play a game, you might as well play the game everyone wants to play and not one that you just decided to on a whim.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even when it comes like on Roll20, I have a lot of just one shot, like D&D one shots set up for like when we're not playing the campaign, and even those sometimes the players don't really want to do, only because they just want to play their character. They don't want to kind of create a new one, which is weird.
We talked about earlier. You've established a connection with this character, and you want to see what happens to them. You don't want to You don't want to take a week off. It's like watching Game of Thrones. You don't want to watch Game of Thrones for 5 weeks straight, and the next Sunday they're like, instead we're gonna show cartoons. Like, you don't want to do that. You want to see what happens to these characters you've been watching. You've grown attached to them.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's weird. I have I guess maybe because I'm a DM, I'm so used to just making characters really quickly. Like for some people, I know a lot of people who it takes them so long to come up with a character idea. But me, it's like I can cycle through them. Like, even if you just hand me a sheet with stats and without a name, like, I'll fill it in and I'll make it a character that's weird or funny. I do that all the time on one-shot shows and stuff.
See, I really like to spend, I don't spend a whole lot of time coming up with NPCs, but I think my players will agree that I am very good at coming up with very endearing NPCs. Like this campaign, this season of our podcast, the characters encountered an orc spy, kind of a hunter sort of character, who they could not pronounce his quote-unquote Christian name, so he was referred to as Whisper because he was so quiet and sneaky. And he grew attached to Madeline's character, Antigone, and was pretty much like a big, scary orc puppy dog that followed her around everywhere, wouldn't let her out of his sight, and was willing to die for her. And I cannot tell you how many emails I got about Whisper, about how everyone loved that character. And what's funny right now is there was a huge fight. See, there's people in your chat right now, Nishana and Sean are loving Whisper. The last they saw of him, this big brawl went down in the middle of this compound, and they were forced to flee, and they never saw what happened. So they don't know if Whisper's still out in the world waiting to join up with them again, or if he's dead. And holding that over their heads is why I love being a dungeon master. I love the power that comes with it, because if everything's going really well in our campaign, I may be like, whoops, you come across the dead, rotting body of Whisper. But if things are going bad, maybe Whisper shows up to save the day. Now, I already know what's going to happen, and I would never.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But they don't know, which is really enjoyable for me. It's very sadistic, but I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to tell because I don't really get a ton of reaction from the players as far as the characters go. I know I can easily make players hate a bad guy. That is easy to do. But I do know, because alright, so there was one NPC, and in my Curse of the Crimson Throne game that's been going on for very long, I had a player who, I guess at the start of the game, he sort of decided that his character, this he was a very Japanese themed swordsman, kind of a swashbuckler who used a katana, except he had never actually been to the land of where that culture comes from in the setting. So
he's an Americanized fan of Japanese stuff. I love it.
No, he didn't even know where. He just saw it and thought it looked cool, and he just sort of developed a persona around it, and so that was his character. But he fancied himself a ladies' man, so he would even keep in his notes. He would even keep a note of the name and the relationship with him of every female NPC that they came across. And I mean, this included the bodyguard to the queen, who
like his little black book.
It was, yeah, no, it was every woman he came across. He was writing her name, and he was writing "kinda likes us," maybe, just keeping notes about their disposition. And then we introduced the party to this character named Giancarlo Orsini, who is this sort of silver fox-looking master swordsman. He runs a sword school in town, and he's a little bit famous. He's got slicked back gray hair, and he's just got this very sultry Parisian accent, a little bit like that. And that once Giancarlo's name went in this guy's notes, there were no more female names written down.
Oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic.
That's about the only way I really get a judge of how much how the players are kind of feeling about the NPCs. Though I loved Out of the Abyss the first session, because there's a chance to do a lot of really funny ones. There's this Quaggoth, which are these big sort of ape beasts. This one speaks in perfect Elven. He thinks he's an Elven prince. And there's the very kind of jowly Kuatoa, Zen guy who does not like violence. and they were really fun characters to play. The players had a lot of fun interacting with, like, whenever one NPC spoke up and he was like, "Well, I should not ride violence," and the players, like, you can see their eyes light up, like, I love this character and I'm gonna go over and I want to talk to him more.
It's funny how just throwing some interesting voice on a character can make such a big difference. In my first real Dungeon World campaign that I ran for 13 months, it was the longest game I've ever run. Also with 7 people, which is a big group for me.
Yeah.
The party, one of the guys in the party was, I don't remember his official name, but he referred to himself as Dragon Jesus. He essentially was this ancient dragon reborn as an elf, and his whole life's quest was to essentially reunite all these dragons into kind of like one family again, one cohesive race. And so they essentially went out hunting all these dragons down to let them know what the deal was. Well, there was a dragon that I introduced them to, who I had predetermined lived in a cave by himself for like 300 years. So he had the mentality of a curious, like, 3-year-old. Like, he would ask a million questions. He would try to play with them and hurt them. He'd pick up one of their swords, like, "What is this?" and then bend it in half. Like, and his whole thing was that he just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked, and no one could get a word in edgewise. And I thought I was making this really obnoxious character they were gonna hate, and they fucking loved that dragon. And I'd already had predetermined that at one point they go to this city and this war breaks out, and they're there with these dragons, but the city wants to kill these dragons, yada yada yada. So they're essentially trying to get them through the city without this entire citywide army killing them. Well, I knew that this dragon was going to die. He was going to sacrifice himself for them to get away. And I had one girl at my table, whenever I started describing his death, she just stood up, picked up her bag, and just left the room. And I was like, okay. And we waited a minute and then went and looked, and she had just left. She just got up, got in her car, and drove home. Like, apparently what I told her was just too much. It just overwhelmed her and hurt her so bad. And that night I texted her and I'm like, "Is everything okay?" And she was like, I can't talk to you right now. I have to talk to you tomorrow." And I was like, I felt bad, like I had done something bad. But in the end, she told me, she was like, "Thank you for introducing me to this character. I mean, just someone that you pretended to be for like maybe 3 or 4 sessions that I loved so much that when this fake character died, I was so affected I had to walk out of the room." Like, that's powerful stuff. And for me, that's kind of like, that's deep down, that's the root of why I love doing this. I love being able to kind of share these stories with everyone at the table around you and really kind of, I don't want to say like toy with people's emotions, because that sounds vindictive and evil, but that's not my intention. But to be able to affect their emotions with storytelling, I think that's a powerful skill.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't say any of my players are kind of, I don't know. I've never seen I don't know anyone who would be that emotional over a character dying. But hopefully, I guess it's the dream. Because you kind of it's not something you really, as a DM, I don't think it's probably not something you really don't consider until it happens. Like,
for sure. Well, that's like Madeline. She's in our chat right now. Hey, Mad Dog. She, as I was telling you before we started recording, the 3 players I have in my game right now, there's James, who is my co-host. He plays a barbarian dwarf named Simon Gravelgold, which I think is probably one of my favorite character names ever of all time. There's Madeline, who plays Antigone Wells, who's a high elf wizard. And then Chris plays Dovroth Zorbor, a dragonborn paladin. All 3 of them very much have their own specific sort of role in their party together, and essentially I've kind of in my head given them this story arc that I want to push them towards. Well, for Madeline, every NPC I introduce, and I mean literally every NPC I introduce, she immediately has this fondness for them. And I think that's just Madeline as a person, and I think she's incorporated that into her character. Multiple times she has gotten very upset at the table. I mean, visibly upset because of something that's happened to these NPCs. And what I think is cool about the whole role-playing aspect and playing with a group at a table is James's character Simon by default doesn't care. He lived by himself for his whole life.
Yeah.
So he didn't care. If, an NPC dies, fuck it. It's not him. Better him than them. They weren't strong enough to survive. I see him, James, because of Madeline's emotions, which she feeds into her character, feed into his character, and that makes his character more sympathetic, which feeds his story arc. And it's just this whole balance of being able to affect one character, really kind of, that domino effect around the table. Everyone kind of comes around, and their opinions and their feelings on the situation change and grow. And it's awesome because not only does your narrative get heavy and have real stakes, but your players at the table grow closer together. So as you progress, this story gets more and more personal. Their decisions become more role-playing based and less, well, my character is better at this, so I'll do it. Instead, it's like, my character would do this, so I'll do it regardless if the sheet says I'm bad at it.
Yeah.
Which is really important to me, and I love that aspect.
By the way, real quick, thank you, Designer DZ and Madogaf, for hitting that follow button. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that's Madeline and Chris. So, good job, guys.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Dice Thulu's Embrace. I hope it is... Oh, god damn it. A moth flew in my drink.
It's just a Mothman. A Mothman, uh-oh.
Now I gotta put that over there. Alright, so... what I was gonna say, I did have a little tidbit. It was kind of meshing with what you said. Specifically going back to the character that died, because I had the exact opposite experience very recently. I just got, we just ended a campaign called Tinker's Tale. Now, bear in mind that's the name of the campaign. Tale is Tail. Run by Leigh Hunt, who on the Encounter Roleplay channel. She's awesome. It was an amazingly fun campaign. However, about the second session or something, we were sent out of this weird town that was all kind of enslaved to this drug that made everyone super happy, and we met this catfolk person, and she had but thank you, SG Bent, for hitting that follow button. You are awesome. May Dice Thulu's tentacles caress you lovingly. No, as she was kind of playing this character. I guess in her mind she had envisioned him as being slightly antagonistic in tone to the party. Thank you, Koval Mario, for also hitting that follow button. Oh my god, you guys are awesome.
Hi, Mario.
What is going on? Thank you, you're a gentleman and a scholar. So she was playing this character to sort of be, he was kind of a dick. That's the best way I can put it, in that he was...
That's every character James plays, which is super entertaining, by the way.
Yeah, it's great, except for the fact that this was an NPC, and when she had, I guess, thought that he was going to be, like, this kind of, like, be a little bit coy and a little bit of an asshole to the party in a way that would kind of make them still like him, but... It did not go that way, and it specifically didn't go that way because he kind of magically put us to sleep at the end of one session, and then one of the players had a wife back in town, and then we had talked to him the next morning, and he had mentioned having visited this man's wife while we were asleep, and this guy was playing a character that had huge anger issues, so that right away, relationships with this NPC straight down the toilet. And long story short, that particular engagement, when we woke up, ended up with us tying him to a broken wheel of his cart and waterboarding him.
Shit.
And
that's intense, man.
Yeah, and he was actually the NPC that the entire campaign was based around us helping, and so the guy threatened him saying, if I ever see you again, I will kill you. Now what happens at the very last session of the game, we see him again, and when the player says, I told you I did not want to see you again, and we before combat started, he used magic to like force choke this player, and so we all just went into combat with him as well as the enemy boss, and we killed the shit out of both of them, and that was how the campaign ended.
We had something very similar. The same girl that got up and left just because I killed a dragon. which sounds a lot worse when you're not thinking about it in role-playing terms. But she played the only evil character in our entire Dungeon World game. And I know a lot of DMs will not allow evil characters, and it depends on what kind of game I'm running, but sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. In this particular one, I did, and it got to the point where she was conniving against everyone, to the point where she would be like, I need to tell you something, and we'd leave the room so she could tell me her actions so the rest of the party didn't know, because no one was willing to not metagame because they knew she was trying to.
Oh shit! Got Skype.
Something happened?
Yeah, I just had Skype freeze for a second. It's all right. We're back.
Oh, gotcha. So I don't know if anyone missed what I just said or not, but anyway, we had this girl who was an evil character who everyone was at the table was pissed off about, and so she decided she was going to ditch the party for a while and go to the tavern. She ditched the party. She went to the tavern. And while she's there, she starts hitting on a NPC. And I think, okay, cool, we'll do this. You know, this is harmless, no big deal. Well, that turned into her seducing the NPC, walking him into the woods, and then killing him in the woods.
What?
Just because she was upset and wanted to kill somebody. Well, I hadn't decided this at the time, but when that happened, I was like, oh, in my head, I'm like, oh, that guy was totally the prince. That guy was totally someone important in disguise. And so the following day, whenever they're they're woken at their taverns by the horns of the city guard, and they come outside, and there's a decree that the city's on lockdown till they find whoever murdered the priest. She immediately runs to them and is like, I need you guys to help me out. It was me who killed him. And they were all like, what do you need us to do? I'm sorry. Like, no one was, they were just pretty much like, fuck you, you can die. And that got tough. It's really hard to DM a group when you have one person who is actively working against the party and the party knows it. That makes it even harder. So it was interesting. And honestly, the day she got up and left the table because she was sad, it was effective because of storytelling, but it was also enjoyable for the rest of us because we didn't like her a whole lot. But that's a story for another time, I guess.
Oh yeah, no, that reminds me of such a weird story. Like a game I had that lasted one session because of PvP. This one girl wanted to play a character that she wanted to play the traditional I'm not with the party kind of character.
The lone wolf, man.
Yeah.
Special snowflake. I hate it.
It was just to make the story brief, they were fighting on the road, and she had decided to throw a dagger from the woods to kill a kobold. And whatever, she did. The fight was over, and they were like, where the fuck did this dagger come from? So they took it with them, and they went to town. And so they all got, they went to town, they got a room at the party got a room at the inn. And she was like, I gotta get my dagger back. So she decided to sneak into their room in the tavern in the middle of the night to take her dagger back. What she didn't plan for is the fact that one of the players was playing a Warforged. This was back in 4th edition.
Yeah.
He didn't sleep. He was just hanging out in the room. And so he immediately spots her trying to break in the window. He screams to wake up the rest of the party, and she bolts. Now they chase her down the stairs of this tavern. They catch her, and then she tries to fight back, so the only thing they could do is beat her unconscious and hand her to the guards and say, this woman broke into our room and tried to rob us. And she's like, she was like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you want me to do? They don't know you. And so it was like, I wish I could have saved that group, but it's like, at that point, you can't do anything. It's you let it spiral out of control.
Yeah. That's about all you can do sometimes. Just watch the spiral and enjoy it.
By the way, we are coming up on the end of the first hour. I hope you guys have been having a great time hanging out with us here on the Fuzzy Dice Show with me and my guest Jason from Too Cool For Tabletop. As we like to take the second hour and just talk about stuff, but we also like to take your questions, anything you want to discuss, stories, whether you have questions about D&D in general, or whether you want to you want to ask us things about what we do, or just share whatever. Go ahead and post it in chat, and we'll be happy to discuss any topics that you guys throw our way. So go ahead and throw us them. I'm just going to hit that fuzzy macro because that will have all of the information in there. So yeah, give us some topics to talk about, some questions. You got 2 DMs here if you want to ask a DM about anything. We are your personal dancing monkeys for the next hour.
And I feel like Sean and Nishana, who are respectively Brooklyn Sheep and SG Bent, if you guys need to talk about tacos with me, we can talk about tacos. I mean, we did on Twitter, so I feel like the topic should focus around tabletop gaming, but if there has to be a taco conversation in there, we'll make it quick.
I mean, I saw that little blog post you throw up, and there was sort of a Taco Bell name drop in there.
Ooh, that is true. That is. I mean,
true. I'm down with the tacos.
But I can't talk about Taco Bell in front of Chris, who is designer DZ, because he will make fun of me because he doesn't agree that it's actually tacos. So maybe we'll avoid the topic.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't disagree because I have another taco place that I could actually go to farther down the road. The thing is, I am frequently up till 4 in the morning working, so Taco Bell is the only thing that's open.
But you're in New York, right?
I am on Long Island, yeah.
See, I'm in Texas, so there's taco places everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all delicious.
I'm sure they're open till 6 a.m.
Oh, no. This is a bunch of old Texas people, so they close at 9. So that sucks. But Madeline asked a question. Jason, what kind of shampoo do you use? Madeline, I don't know. My wife buys it. That's it. I will say for a long time I did this thing. I did the whole no poo, which sounds funny because it has the word poo in it, but where you don't actually use shampoo, you just scrub your hair, and for about a month your hair looks fucking disgusting, but then all the natural oils make it look luxurious and amazing, and I did that for a year, and it was pretty fantastic. But I live in Texas, and it's hot and muggy, so even when your natural oils are doing fancy things to your hair, if it's hot and muggy, you just have a disgusting, curly, gross fro. So,
we are getting to the issues today on this show. I cannot wait to put this on YouTube because I've got all kinds of tags that I'm gonna put on this shit. Hair advice,
tacos, shampoo, hashtag no poo.
Oh man, no, I mean. I can definitely talk tacos. Shampoo, probably less so. I have a bottle that I found. I just picked it off the shelf when I went to Vegas.
I thought you were going to say you just found a bottle of
shampoo. Yeah, I found it on the
shelf.
I've been using it ever since.
I found it behind Taco Bell in the alley, and I just washed my hair with it.
Look, you know how in D&D sometimes you get a flask of endless water? It's like that, but with shampoo.
Ah. Okay, got another question. Brooklyn Sheep, a.k.a. Nishana, asks, hey, Jason, how are we going to get you into board games? Well, I don't know.
I feel like asking that question is probably the first step.
Yeah, that's true. The first, the first step in fixing a problem is admitting there is one. But I don't know that there is a problem. I own Pandemic. It was given to me by a friend. That's pretty fun. Chris brought over a pretty cool game. Something Haunted Hill. What was it?
House on the Hill. Yeah.
And that seems pretty cool. But for me, I don't know. I don't even look at games. I don't look at role-playing games as games. I look at them as storytelling where there are some rules to give it some structure, I guess. I don't dislike board games. It's just not my favorite. I would much rather talk about the story and where these characters have come from, what they're going, and their hardships, than I would be like, cool, I moved 4 spaces. Oh, you're dead.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
It's very different.
What we're saying is board games are for nerds. I got it. It's cool. We don't want to twist the message here.
A very good friend of mine who I've known literally my entire life since first grade. He is a host of a podcast called, oh my God, how come I don't remember the name of his podcast? Travis, if you're listening, and you're totally not, I am really upset that I cannot think of the name of your podcast. What the hell is it called? I'm looking it up right now. I'm continually talking to buy time. It is called, oh, son of a bee sting, how come it's not popping up? It's essentially one player game podcast. Maybe it's one player pod. No, that's what's his name's game. Man, I'm a terrible friend right now. I've known this guy my whole life, and I can't even tell you the name of his podcast right now. Anyway, he hosts this podcast that's all about 1 and 2 player games, board games and stuff like that. And he's got a lot of followers, a lot of fans. It's a cool idea, and I've played some of these games, and they're fine. But it's not a role-playing game, and that's really what it is for me. That's the big deal for me, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure that if I sat down, had a few drinks, and just hung out with friends, played a board game, I would love it, but I wouldn't get invested the way I do in stuff like this.
Yeah, no, like, I know people that are crazy into board games. Obviously, I just, I don't have that kind of play. Like, I don't have anyone to play board games with around me. Like, all my friends, I'm post college. Sure. All my friends are moved to different places along with me. It's like it's not something that you can really do unless you've got a community of people around you who are all totally down for it. And it's it can definitely be just as much of a social thing as role-playing games, but I guess it's something you sort of have to choose to do with your group. I guess I'd probably fall in the same category. Like, I like role-playing games. I'd probably err on the side of those only because I don't get to do strange voices when I'm playing a board game. Like, I do it when I play Monopoly, but people just get annoyed and tell me to stop.
That's why I like playing as the shoe in Monopoly, because then I just talk like I'm a shoe, It makes sense. I get you. And by the way, I remembered the name of his show. It's Low Player Count. So go find him on Twitter at Low Player Count, so I don't feel like such a horrible person for forgetting the name. All right, someone else. Let's hear a question. I don't want to hear a taco-related question, and I don't want to hear another goddamn board-related question. Tell me something, a board game-related question. Let's hear it. Something cool. Come on, guys.
If not, I have I have to find where I saved them, but I have a thing. Both people have sent me questions and stuff on Reddit and on Twitter, and I saved them, but I don't have them open right now. So
that's cool.
Well,
in the time it takes you to open it, maybe someone will ask a compelling question that incites conversation. I'm not going to hold my breath because I know a lot of these people.
Well, you guys, we are. Oh, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong Skype thing. We are hanging out here, and as always, we're taking your D&D questions. I mean, I'm not really good for answering anything that isn't D&D. Like, that's literally all I've devoted my brain to, and everything else is just gone at this point. So, if you have D&D questions, Dungeon Master questions, that's cool. So,
seems like Fix-It Geek is familiar with Low Player Count. That's cool, man. I'm glad you know it. My buddy Travis, who's one of the hosts, I've known that guy my entire life. We went to school together. I knocked out one of his teeth when we were children, and I've known that guy literally since I was like a small child, so that's pretty cool that you know him. What is the most challenging part of DMing?
Oh, that's
excellent question.
That is a good question, and it's one that I'm sure you and I can probably answer in very much depth.
I would say for me, just pure and simple, is improvisation. Being able to make something up on the fly. If I have it planned out that the characters are going to start at point A and end up at point B, and halfway there you guys take a left and head to point R, making up what that is. Like, essentially, I have to make up characters, plot points, geography, lore, history, everything like that you can think of on the spot in front of you as you're all staring at me waiting for me to talk. That's tough.
Do you now this is a personal question from me to you. When you're DMing, do you find yourself asking your players for a few minutes to plan something, or do you just throw out whatever the first thing that comes out into your mind and hope it works?
We're always recording. I don't play games that aren't recorded for the podcast anymore, and we don't really edit. Occasionally, I'll edit out a good chunk of silence if I'm looking up a rule or something, but I typically don't like to edit the episodes because I want people listening to get the full experience of what it's like to sit at a table and play. So I really don't, man. If they ask me, if they ask or they decide we're going to go into this building, I'm like, I really hope I can come up with something together. And what's funny is sometimes it's a real quick thing that happens and it's over. Sometimes it's a new plot point or a new character that is heavily involved in the game going forward. You never really know how it's going to work. It's kind of interesting.
Hey, Will, what's going on, man? Will from Encounter Roleplay decided to stop by.
Hello, Will.
He remembered I was streaming over... No, that's pretty interesting, because what I think one of the things when it comes to improv for me is I tend to throw at, like, usually I will have notes, like I'll have plan what I want to do, or in my head I'll be like how I really want to handle something, but when I have to improv it, I'll usually just throw out the first thing that comes into my head and then go around later and just sort of try it, adjust things to make it seem like I knew what I was doing.
Oh yeah, man. I told James a while back in our game that at one point I think Madeline's character asked a very simple question to an NPC, and I answered it right off the top of my head, and it wasn't until like 2 weeks later that I'm like, oh my god, that is 100% fucking wrong. That completely derails stuff I had planned. So I had to I wrote and wrote pages and pages trying to figure out just how to make one word one guy said mean something else. And eventually I got around to it, and it worked out, and we kind of glossed over and went about our business, but I don't know.
Yeah, I did that when
it was interesting.
I did that when a player he had one of my players was playing a cultist, so he picks up items and he has like visions of their owner or like what happened to them last.
Gotcha.
And so they picked up this amulet, and he had a flash of a vision of some kid being murdered, and I thought that was really cool and really dramatic, and it was at the time, except for the fact that the event hadn't happened yet. It was in the future, and then when it actually happened, and the player's like, oh shit, this is what I saw in my vision, and then he's like, wait a minute, I see the past, not the future, and I'm like, fuck!
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because in our campaign right now, and I won't give anything away, players who are in my game and listening, they have been dealing with a character who essentially is a sorcerer who has these divination abilities, who keeps showing them glimpses of the future by accident. Like, he can't control his power, and anytime it's a little kid. Anytime the little kid gets spooked, he just goes off, and his magic sets off, and they keep getting these visions. So they have seen visions of the future. So it's very difficult as a DM without railroading to guide them into a position to where that reality actually happens. But
you know what the weirdest thing that's been popping up recently is I had in that Crimson Throne game, and then in my Jade Region game, I had again this this cultist who gets visions of items, and now I have a fortune teller witch, and who will read people's fates and stuff, their fortunes, and so often like he'll just read objects that they're literally just treasure objects in a place that
Sure.
I haven't thought about what where these things came from and whatever. So when he'll pick it up and I'll say like I wanna see what I can see, see if I can get a vision from this. And I find myself having to create these sort of like weird dream visions of events that I'm just making up in my head on the fly, and hoping that they're nebulous enough that they seem cool and that they hopefully in the future will seem prophetic, because but it's something I found myself doing a lot. To answer the question specifically, I think improv is probably one of them. Also, I struggle a lot with voices. I struggle a lot with making voices different and interesting, I think. I put a lot of effort into it, but I find myself falling back into the same ideas so often that I kind of go over them. No, Will, I can't read your palm. I can do a tarot card reading, though, if you want. It'll take a while, because I have to draw 9 cards, and I have to interpret them, but we'll sit down and we'll do it sometime. So, yeah, weird voices are weird for me. But, improv is a go-to. I'm terrible at improv. Oh, God.
Well, let's see. I told everyone I was going to answer. We're going to get to all these
definitely.
questions. I want everyone to feel super important, because they are. We love you guys so much. Kisses and hugs. Fix It Geek asks, you mentioned some other RPGs you like, both of you. What elements do you consistently bring in? Brian, I'll let you take the lead on that one. What elements do you consistently bring into all of your games?
Oh, God. Hidden roles. That's a thing that I adopted, and I probably, I have a hard time doing without now. I talk about it almost every time on this show, because almost every guest is unfamiliar with it, but it's long story short, it's a simple thing that Roll20 allows me to do with some API tweaking. that lets me make it so players can roll their skill checks, but they don't actually see the result. And I find that it kind of...
Well, that's great for, like, perception checks, because they don't know they're supposed to be seeing something.
I originally started it just for perception checks, but I have since extended it. Sucks if
you're like, roll perception, and they roll it, and you're like, okay, cool, you go about your business. They're like, fuck, what's happening? I know something's happening.
Yeah, no, the philosophy is very simple, and it's like, I originally adopted it specifically for perception checks, based on something I had heard another DM do. And so I adopted it for that, but I've since basically made it a thing for all mental skill rolls. So that means like your diplomacy, your knowledge skills, just all those things. Because that way, it's one of those things that I think it allows me to take meta information out of the hands of the players, so they can just focus on role-playing their character, what their character knows and thinks and stuff. And so when they're fed information by me, they don't have to worry about, okay, am I being fed information that I think is incomplete because of my role, or am I being like, can I trust it? So when they're fed information, they just like they trust what they're given because it's what their character would know.
I like that. I will say for me, the element I consistently bring in is, even if the game does not require it, I really push every character or every player to establish a backstory for their character. Like, you know, something like Dungeon World, where it's narrative heavy, but there's no rules for coming up with a backstory. And D&D is very loose with it. You know, you come up with like some elements that fit your character, but I'll have them like write down who is or what is an event in your life that changed you for the negative? What's an event in your life that changed you for the positive? I ask questions like that to essentially get them thinking. That information may never come up in our story, but because that player knows it about their character, it informs their decisions going forward. So, you know, like if you have a character who, in part of their past, you know, watched their kid brother beaten to death by guards because he was, you know, it was staged to look like he stole something, but it was somebody else, and he watched his little brother beaten to death. Maybe that never comes up in our story, but going forward, every time we're in the city, this character is really shitty to guards, really doesn't respect guards and their authority, and anytime they catch a thief, or they know someone in the party is a thief or something like that, they're very protective of that player because of what happened in their past. And like I said, the listeners or even the DM may never know this fact about their history, but it informs how they play their character. And I make every game we play do that. Even games that are not very deep in the story aspect, I really push for characters to come up with a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah, definitely. That's backstory. Backstory is one of those things that I've been pushing for a little bit more. One of the things I tend to not care so much about is like a long, like a written out backstory. I don't need it, because most of the time I'm not going to read it. What I'll read is I'll skim it for the important detail. Like I want the important details, and then the details that I can do something with.
Well, that's definitely why I ask it in questions. I'm like, and usually all my questions, I'm like, in 1 or 2 sentences, tell me this.
Yeah.
Just give me the basics so that I can, you know, that it helps me perceive your character the way you're perceiving your character.
Designer DZ said, how often do your players go off script and throw the DM for a loop?
For me, because that's one of my players asking, and I don't know if I should tell you or not, but you guys don't really do that very much. It's occasional, but not very often, and it's, I think in part is because of, in very much a metagame sense, because if the characters constantly meet NPCs who are like, oh yeah, I just got back from the Dark Castle, and then the guard's like, we just sent 10 men to the Dark Castle, and then you go into the tavern and a bunch of drunken dwarves are talking about the Dark Castle, the players are probably going to go to that fucking Dark Castle. And so that's kind of how I set it up. I will never force any characters to do anything. I like a touch of sandbox. I want them to be able to go out and explore the world how they want to, but I will lay down in very clear terms what I want you to do. And most of the times the players will do that because they want to progress the story. And if I'm telling you to go left repeatedly and you think, fuck it, we'll go right, you can, but nothing's going to get done. You're just going to go right, you know?
Yeah, it's one of those things. People talk all the time about, like, oh, we started this campaign and, we got a few sessions in and my players said, fuck it, we want to go be pirates now. And they just went completely somewhere else with the campaign. And that's never really been something I've experienced. Like, I guess my players sort of understand at the beginning that we're sitting down to play through a story. It's one of those things where hopefully I'm presenting the plot in a way that's interesting and engaging enough that they're always making the choices to progress the story on their own. The story is like they're going.
That's important. That's very important.
Like they're going to that dark castle not because they feel like, okay, well every other avenue has a roadblock in it and that's the only place we can get to. But they're going there because they feel compelled to, or something is.
Their curiosity draws them to it because so many NPCs have said so much about it.
Or not even that, or it's just because something dramatic happened. They know they need to go there to accomplish something that they want to accomplish, and so they want to make that choice. And so very rarely do my players ever do that. And in the times that I find there's potential for it to happen. I will often sort of just lay out here's the thing, and I think every DM sort of subconsciously does. You get to know your players a little bit. You get to know what choices they're probably going to make after a little while. So you can usually account for what they're going to do, and you can usually account for where they might choose to veer off because you've been playing with this person for a while. I know that Harold the Barbarian is probably going to not take an enemy in alive because he tends to end his rage by smashing things' skulls in. I know that's probably going to happen. So even if the players are given a mission to bring someone back alive, I've already planned for what's going to happen if they don't,
For sure. And one of the things I do, and I actually picked this up from Pathfinder when I first played it, was someone had recommended, if there's things that have to happen to compel your story, I refer to those as events. Like right now in our campaign, I told everybody the other day, there's probably 3 to 4 events left that will push the story to its, finale. Now these events, I know what will happen, and I know who will be a part of it, or what will be a part of it. Sometimes I know where it will happen, but if I determine this event has to happen with this NPC, I leave it open where it can happen.
Yeah.
So if I'm focused on the players, if I'm expecting players to go north and they decide to go south, this event can still occur. I'll just change the settings and the scenario leading to it. So that way the story can still progress and they've still been able to make their decision. And I don't personally feel like that's railroading because it's pushing the story forward.
Yeah.
And the steps that lead to that encounter or that event have drastically changed from what I expected. So, I don't know. I think it works.
By the way, thank you, Omar the Thief, for hitting that follow button. Thank you for joining the madness, and Dice Lulu may embrace you. The thing about railroading is interesting because I think whenever I hear people complaining about it particularly, one of the things I always feel is the only way you could really complain about railroading, well, not the only way, but most of the ways that people tend to complain about it is because they assume that they should, they act like they should know what's going to happen beforehand. You told us to go to the castle, we went the other way, and circuitous events, we were still led back to the castle.
Sure.
Well, how do you know that's not how do you know that wasn't planned beforehand?
Well, for me, if it makes sense in the fiction, which is a very Dungeon World thing to do, and I apply it to any game I ever play, fictionally, if that makes sense, cool. For example, using this Dark Castle scenario, maybe I know it has to happen at the Dark Castle, so I never tell you straight up, or I never tell the players verbatim where this Dark Castle is. So if they go north, south, east, or west, a path leads to that Dark Castle. And again, some people may see that as railroading, and if you do, I can understand why. But if I spend 10 hours over the course of 2 weeks planning out this big dark castle and all this shit to happen, and you decide you don't want to go to the dark castle, that's fine, but I have nothing planned. If you want to go to the happy castle with paintings and unicorns and puppies and kitties, that's fine, but it's gonna be a boring fucking session. You're just gonna spend the whole time petting cats. That's what you're gonna do.
There's also, I think there's sometimes a slightly antagonistic element to it. Like, I've never had it, but I know some players are sort of like, they'll start a campaign like, hey, we want to go save, we want to do a campaign to save us all, and then halfway through they're like, you know what, I think instead of this we're gonna buy a boat and go become pirates. And it's like, all right, cool, but why did you agree to play this campaign then?
Yeah. Well, that's important too, and that's not really in line with the answering of the question. But
oh yeah, no, definitely.
It is very important before you start a game to have that discussion with your players. Like, here's the kind of game I want to play. What kind of game do you want to play? Because if your players want to be murder hobos and go through dungeons and kill everything, and you want to tell a heavy role-playing, heavy persuasion, deception sort of spy sort of game, they're going to be super bummed when they play your game, or you're going to be bummed when you introduce them to all these characters you want them to sneak around and learn information about, and instead they just run in axes swinging and murder everybody. You got to be on the same page for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, it's always important to to make sure you and your players want the same thing out of a game, and that's
for sure.
That's a
you got to be on the same page.
So Brooklyn Sheep was asking, what storylines have you had to abandon because of the players' decisions? That's an interesting question.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I was gonna say, is there anything with that, like, because it seems like that might delve into spoiler territory a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think I could answer it without spoiling. Kind of the opposite of that, the opposite of version of that question, things that I came up with because of the players' decisions. A big thing that that happened in part of our campaign, which this will spoil it for people who haven't listened, but if you haven't listened, that's your own damn fault. But essentially, they the party ends up in the woods, and they find this fortress that these religious, like, the sect of this religion, these cultist sort of characters have established this, like, fortress base, or forest base, and the party sneaks in. Ooh, my audio just got weird. Am I still alive? Everyone still hear me?
Yeah, I had my audio driver.
Oh, okay.
Fluttered for a second. We're all right.
Anyway, they sneak into this base, and they're inside, and things start getting out of hand, and they don't know what to do, and I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know what to do. Like, what do they do? Well, they had their orc buddy Whisper with them, and suddenly I thought, hey, maybe he told the orcs he was coming here, and they're all going to show up to save them. And so that happened, and that happened solely because I didn't know how to get them out of this pickle they put themselves in. And so, I pulled something literally out of nowhere because, one, it would be really cool for the story, and I think it was, and two, it was like, how do I take the pieces I have and make this puzzle look coherent? How do I make this story work without totally, derailing what we've accomplished so far? But,
yeah, there are tons of examples of stories that I've sort of invented whole cloth because of something the players chose or something that happened to them. The entire example would be like, if you watch the Exploding Dice show, one of our players around level 2, he died. I mean, he got straight up mangled by a big kind of nightmare creature on a crit, and he was gone, and they used an occult ritual to resurrect him, and the person that came back, thanks to the ritual, was not the same character. And so now he's sort of he is on a quest to save the person that because what sort of happened was, behind the scenes, the spirit that now inhabits his body saved the actual character's spirit from being corrupted by a Cthulhu demon thing, and that new spirit that's in the body is on a quest to rebuild and the original character and give him his body back. It's a whole story that we wrote and stuff that came out of nowhere because this player died, and the party didn't want him to roll another character. They wanted to do something to save him. But it's something that I've abandoned because of player decisions. I'm trying to think of one offhand, but I can't really. Yeah, I don't know if there are any plans I've sort of straight up abandoned because of something the players did. Only because generally I don't. I'll only make plans that far in advance if I know that it's something that they really can't opt out of. If it's something that their decision could sort of sway in a large part, I tend to take it a lot less. I tend to play it more session by session, or whenever that crops up, and see how things go, so I can make decisions about it on the fly rather than saying like, so I planned for you guys to go here, and then you chose that you wanted to befriend this dude, and now I've got to scrap that plan. Like that, I tend to not. My DM planning doesn't really go that way.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. You I don't know, for being a DM, it's very much thinking on your toes. You may have something planned, and just like you said, I only plan so far in advance. If I try to plan something that's going to happen at the end of the story, at the beginning of the story, there's no way in hell we're getting there unless I force the characters to, which I think is a bummer.
I like to think of my DM prep. I used to work. I dabbled in 3D modeling for a little while, and if you've ever played video games, you know about this technical term called level of detail, which is as the closer you are to things, like they're up close to you, they'll use really high res models. But as you get farther and farther away from objects, they'll swap them in with lower resolution models so the system has an easier time handling them. And the farthest away they get to the really, really low res. So when you think about a campaign, I generally like the end of a campaign will be as simple. Like the only thing I'll have planned for the end of the campaign is this is the bad guy. The party will defeat him somehow. And it's like as I get closer and closer to where I am, the things get a little bit more and more detailed, because you can sort of you basically the things that are closest to you should be the things that you've planned out in the most detail. The things that are far away you should have planned out in as little detail as possible, so that you aren't making assumptions about how they're going to go months and months before they even happen.
Yep. And if you do, you're going to be in for a very, very disappointing time.
Yeah, it is exactly like that. Everything that you find yourself accounting for in the future the players will always find a way to change on you. Fix a Geek asks, did you ever shake up traditional race roles in your campaign, such as orcs are peaceful and halflings are crazy cannibals? Do you ever do a lot of homebrewing?
Our entire game now is homebrewed, and the orcs are very much like you described. They're I wouldn't say they're peaceful. They're still a very warlike community or race, but they've developed this sort of symbiotic relationship with villages that are nearby. I actually have in kind of our lore about this, that villages that are cities that find themselves near an orc encampment are usually very happy they're there, because it deters like bandits or any other sort of ill-willed creatures coming to these cities, because you don't want to show up to the city and like, hey, we're gonna start a war or a riot and kill everybody, and then a bunch of orcs show up and eat your family in front of you. So the orcs are kind of these. I kind of set it up to where the people that have been around a long time, these older people who have gone to war with the orcs in the past, see them as these monsters and evil people, but everyone else is kind of like, yeah, whatever. Like they hang out, they don't bother us, we don't bother them. It's a relationship of mutual respect, and as long as the people really kind of adhere to that, the orcs are not a problem. Which I don't know. I don't like in D&D that you flip to orcs and it's like they're evil. It's like, no, they're not. I mean, maybe they are. Are you telling me every orc is evil? Like, I don't buy that. And I know Chris likes with his paladin to use the I forget the name of the spell, but it lets him detect good and evil, which might be the name of the spell, actually. Yeah. And I let him do that. He does that all the time. I know he likes it, but I think I annoy him with it because I don't agree that everything is evil. And if his character is detecting what is evil, I make sure if I answer that it is evil because it is in direct conflict with his personal morality. There's no inherently evil, inherently good. If I don't know, maybe there's some of it, but if his character thinks that stealing is wrong and it's evil for you to steal, and there's some kid stealing and he does his move, I'll be like, that kid's evil. But this kid might just be stealing to feed his poor family, which inherently is not evil, but because his character perceives thievery as evil, it's evil. So I don't know. I feel like that is very much fudging the intentions with D&D's rules, but to me that makes more sense for our story, so that's how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously there's a lot you can get into with alignment discussions, and I don't, people have their own opinions on them. One of the things that I've enjoyed, and I don't really I don't really break the mold, like do a lot of homebrewing like that. Just changing up things, I guess reskinning races. So it's like, okay, now we've got orcs who are noble traders, and it's the gnomes who are the evil, cannibals out in the desert. Like, I'm sure there's room for that if I ever get around to it. But for example, I like playing with things that are a little bit off kilter. So for example, Curse of the Crimson Throne, which is my Friday game, takes place in a city called Corvosa. And Corvosa is a lawful evil city where a large percentage of the city's population is given over to the worship of Asmodeus, which is a devil. And they worship Asmodeus because he is the god of contracts and law. And for a city, I mean, it's not a bad system to function on. And it's a really...
It makes sense. The logic and reason is there.
Yeah, and it plays into the fact, because in my opinion at least, evil and good with capital E and capital G are different from the way we use them in the English word, in the English language. In D&D, evil technically just means seeking to serve yourself before or at the expense of other people, whereas good is seeking to serve other people before or at the expense of yourself. So most people in the city are selfish, which means that generally a lot of them, but they all pretty much all of them except some of the criminal classes, follow the law, which means technically all of them are, or a grand majority of them are lawful evil. Which means it makes relying on alignments and things in how to determine how you interact with people that you meet for the first time a little less reliable. Yeah,
I do. I agree with that.
Which is interesting. Yeah, I like playing with stuff like that. I would totally love to run a campaign in like Cheliax. It's an entire country given over to devil worship, where like they kind of maintain a really strict, like iron-fisted rule of law. And there's actually a whole campaign written where those lawful evil people are the protagonists. And they're
that's kind of like in our story now. I mean, to really sum it up quickly, it's kind of become this Celestials versus demons sort of storyline. Only for the party to kind of learn that neither side really gives a shit about them. It's kind of their own personal fight, and I know Chris, or his character, did his alignment check on the demon, and it's like evil, and he did the alignment check on the angel, and it was like evil.
Yeah.
And he brought it up to the demon and was like, well, what do I do? They're evil. And the demon pretty much said, dude, they're new at being evil. They're just starting it out. I have this shit down. I've done this since I've existed. You can trust me a lot more with my evil than you can trust them. And to me, I kind of interpreted that as, it's like, you want to take someone hunting with you. Dude, I've been hunting my entire life. This guy just bought a gun. Like, you're going to want to go with me,
I love the playing with NPCs. I love the philosophy of like a dishonest person you can always trust to be dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a fun idea to play with players, because here's the weirdest thing, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but for some reason I have realized that it doesn't matter what someone's agenda or alignment is. If an NPC starts telling a player information, they will take that information as true, and they will assume that this NPC has their best interests at heart.
I was about to say that same thing, man. It's something I've done forever, and I'm just now realizing in this game that, like, I can have every NPC ever lie to the players, and they wouldn't question it.
Yeah, they wouldn't even care.
It just recently, Madeline's character, she found a cleric book that gives her some cleric spells, and I think it's Cone of Truth, and she casted it on a character so that they would tell her the truth and not lie. And she failed the role, and this character told her, listen, I'm here to tell you this information. My goal is to explain the situation to you so you make a smart decision, because what comes next is important. And the whole time she was upset because she didn't know if she could believe me or not. And it's the first time that's ever come up in a game I've played, because always they meet an NPC, the NPC says, oh, we gotta go kill that old man up on the mountain. He's a scary, evil wizard. And they're like, well, fuck it, I got a knife. Let's go kill the wizard. And if they get up there, what happens when the wizard's like, no, I'm just an old man. That guy who lives down in that, who lives in that village is telling everyone I'm evil, but he's evil. So who do they believe now? They've been told two completely different things by two different characters.
Yeah, it's again, it's such a weird thing, and I don't know. I guess it falls into the same mentality that, for example, like if you've ever run a group through a dungeon, like a dungeon full of traps, they'll start out really crazy paranoid and they'll check every space around them for traps, but at some point they will get comfortable enough that they stop checking for traps. Yeah. And it's like, it's always about halfway through the dungeon and they're like, oh shit, there are still pit traps. Yeah. Like, that's when you throw a pit trap at them, because they've forgotten about the fucking pit traps.
It's funny, the first character I ever played, and it was in AD&D, it was 2.5 edition. I was a chaotic neutral, or maybe it was true neutral. I was a rogue. I was a thief, a rogue, what have you. And from the beginning, I'd never played before. This is the first game I ever played. I was so terrified of that character dying because I liked him so much that I just slowly put my paranoia about him into his character. So he was a super paranoid character. I invested a lot of time and money into buying traps. Every time we'd go to a tavern, I would set like a pulley system on the door, not a tavern, but like an inn. I'd set this pulley system trap on my door and window, so that way if essentially if you open the door, an axe would swing down and hit you in the face, or if you open the window from the outside, an axe would swing from the side and hit you in the face. So I was super paranoid. Every time we just decided to go like lay down to go to sleep in an inn, my room was a death trap that would murder anyone who tried to come in. Yet we would go into a dungeon and I just fucking run. I'm like, what do? I run into the dungeon. Let's kill everything. I don't know. I was a very weird rogue. I was paranoid, among the regular people of every town, but put me in a dangerous situation and I forget I'm supposed to be scared and paranoid.
Yeah, I have this this conversation. It's the reason I know this dungeon thing is because people always find it weird, but one of my favorite dungeons, my favorite modules ever, is the Tomb of Horrors. I think it's such a fantastic treatise on just how, like, messing with people and how people work, because it's one of those things where, like, it sets up all of its rules in the very first room that you enter, and then it just kind of plays with those rules as you go along. And one of the things is the pit traps, where this whole first hallway is full of pit traps, and the players will go through it just dodging them left and right. And once they leave that hallway, they won't experience a pit trap till like 2/3 of the way through the dungeon, when they just start, like, they sneak up out of nowhere. There's just all of a sudden pit traps, and it's, by that point the players have probably forgotten that they technically should have been checking every single square along the way. But
you set that expectation so early, and then you let it just go, and then you forget about it. It's very fun.
But yeah, no, I love playing with NPCs and just messing with. I had one of the awesome plot lines in Crimson Throne was I had the players completely thrown for a loop when they realized almost everything that they had done between level 2 and level 4 was, and it was a lot of stuff because our game runs very slow. Was them doing errands and doing these things that basically enabled some shadowy, anonymous, hidden hand in the darkness to set up a drug empire, while they did all of the work for him, and everything that they did was linked to that guy, and they didn't realize it till the end. But it's like, it was one of those things where when they finally realized it, they're like, wait, you mean we weren't clearing off that dock and securing it for this guy? So he, for good, like, he's a drug dealer. What do you want?
Yeah.
my plots are crazy complex like that.
Well, that's fun, man. I like that sort of the layered way those stories kind of unfold. Like the our first big Dungeon World campaign, the characters met the villain, the like final boss in the first session, and he wasn't this terrifying, evil, scary monster. He was the most beloved person in this city who had saved the lives of everyone in this city multiple times. So they meet this guy and learn about how great he is, and they hear about how great he is for over a year. We played this game about how great he is. He's this wonderful guy. Everyone they meet just loves him. And then they show up at the scary bad castle at the end to finally, fight whoever it was that they got to kill. And it was that guy.
Yeah,
they were so stunned, like they were almost pissed because one of the guys was like, "We could have just killed that guy, and the first time we met him, it would have been random and weird, but we would have been done already. What would have happened if you'd done that?" I was like, I would have wrote another campaign, I guess.
Yeah, one of the best tools for keeping a campaign interesting, and I find that like almost in my setting, I can almost think of no high level NPCs that aren't constantly under the effect of like an obscure alignment spell, like a spell that makes them detect as the opposite alignment.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they're all scheming assholes, and they all use that spell to make it look like they're good. It's just, it's an easy precaution.
I really like to take, I almost will go the opposite way with that sometimes, is I'll take this character and make it extremely obvious that this is a bad character. This is a bad guy. They should be killing this guy. They need to stop this guy from doing what he's doing. But then I keep putting him in these impossible situations where they can't get to him. Like, yeah, he's evil and he's bad, but he also is at a giant party with 500 people that all adore him, which is essentially how that one game started. They met the bad guy who they met him at a parade thrown in his honor. Like the entire town was at this parade to celebrate this man's life. And had they known then, they couldn't have killed him anyway, because as soon as you killed him, they would have been arrested and killed themselves. So yeah, they would have won, but they also would have died. Yeah. So it's I really like making them. Get in situations that have no easy answer. I like making them choose, which is part of the fun for me.
Yeah, one of the final boss for this Crimson Throne campaign is technically the Queen, and it was interesting because the players were exposed to her really early on in the campaign. The king died, and they knew that no one really liked the Queen because she was young and she was from Cheliax, and their city doesn't like Cheliax, so there used to be a colony of them. And she really kind of has a disdain for the city that she rules. And so immediately, riots broke out and people were shit-talking the Queen. And so they go through this whole kind of experience, not liking her, but they don't like her as a person. They don't like her because she's a bad queen and because they agree with the rest of the city that they shouldn't like her. But they're slowly kind of realizing that, because when they met her, they were like, okay, she's technically an asshole, but she was nice to us when we met her. Because they returned a piece of jewelry that she owned, and she rewarded them personally. But they're slowly realizing that, okay, maybe she's a terrible person, but maybe she's also evil, because she keeps doing things that are just slightly morally questionable. Recently she enacted military rule and created this army of female knights who wear these faceless masks, as well as plague doctors, and she's been doing all this stuff as a plague is hitting the city, and so they're realizing, okay, they're probably we are, because they started out okay, the Queen's evil, and then they met her and they're like, okay, she's probably not evil, she's probably just a douche. And then they're like, okay, she's probably a douche and she's evil. They're slowly getting back to that.
Douche.
And it's one of those things where I hope over the course of the campaign I can kind of reveal detail until eventually they get to the point where okay, no, definitely she's evil. And now we just can't do anything because we can't get close to her.
Well, that same mentality, man, in talking about earlier how the players just inherently believe everything they're told. The campaign that we've done on this podcast is, the whole time the players have been serving what they believe to be this, doing what was good and doing what was right. and just recently they essentially found out that they weren't necessarily serving the villain, but they were just serving someone else's agenda that didn't benefit them or anyone else. It was just serving someone else, and it's become this very much the lesser of two evils. And they were forced to make a decision on who they were going to follow, who they perceived to be the villain and who they perceived to be the hero. And it was fun for me because the villain ended up being, in their minds, at least the villain were the angels and the hero was the demon. And I don't know, it's fun to put them in those situations where they think they know what's going on, only to realize that they are, woefully misinformed.
Yeah, definitely. So we are we've been hanging out, guys. If you've got any questions, I know we've been talking for a while. If you've got any questions, anything you want to hit us with, we've got, I don't know, like 13 more minutes here. And obviously we do want to do some stuff at the end. So go ahead and shoot us the last couple questions. Anything, any topics you want to hit before the end, or Jason, if there's anything you want to, anything interesting you want to throw out, that you maybe haven't gotten to talk about.
Well, really, and I don't know how the end of this is going to be, being my first time on your show. I definitely want to pitch some details just about our podcast so people can listen, if that's cool with you.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're welcome to talk about it. I love to do sort of plug, to let people plug their stuff. I just didn't want it to be like, do that and then a couple minutes of weird dead air. Go
however, man.
Talk for 10 minutes about your podcast. I will just sit here and drink my iced tea.
I'll just make it very simple.
No, it's fine.
Essentially, if you're watching and you haven't listened, it's Too Cool For Tabletop. You can listen to us on toocoolfortabletop.com. We have a new website that we just finished building that's I'm really proud of, so I would prefer you listen to it there, but you don't have to. You listen on SoundCloud, you can listen on iTunes, listen on Google Play Music, wherever you want to listen. But listen to our show. It's fun. Stuff happens. At the beginning, for season 1, we did a lot of one-shots where we just brought in new people every time. Season 2, which has been from episode 12 up until now, has been an ongoing campaign that we started with 2 people who were new to it, and we've started recording some more one-shots, so they'll be kind of spliced in. But more or less, if you want to listen to people play a game like these we're discussing for the first time, and kind of follow along with them as they either decide they love it or hate it. Spoiler alert, they always love it because it's awesome. Do that. And we do new episodes come out every Monday. Although I usually upload them Sunday night, but whatever. Every Monday you can listen to a new episode. And yep, that's it. That's all. Was that 10 minutes? No, that was 2 minutes.
So I guess the one thing, well, the one thing I want to talk about, and that's because I like asking people about it when they, when they've kind of, once they've got their podcast, is has doing your particular podcast, like, has that sort of sparked an interest in doing other, like, kind of doing other sort of gaming related things, with other people, or like, is it just you just keep, like, is your goal just to keep into this one thing? Because I know very few people stick to, like, they start one podcast and they never do anything else. Like, a lot of people kind of branch out from there.
Well, I will say that really my focus is Too Cool For Tabletop. We used to stream on Twitch, myself, James, and Chris, but we were usually just playing games on Steam. We played a lot of Rocket League, which we tried to, like, goof off and be entertaining, but it really had nothing to do with our podcast, so we stopped doing it. And I'll be working on some new stuff on that front. But we are really this one podcast is my main focus. Although we are have just started recording a spin-off podcast, which I guess I will announce here because why not? It is exclusively available to our Patreon patrons. So if you don't give me money, you can't listen to it, as shitty as that sounds. But essentially, our game takes place in a homebrew world that is called Festin. And what this podcast is, it is called Homebrew and Brews. James, who is my co-host, is very much a beer connoisseur. He is always into fancy, craft beers. So the way this podcast works is essentially at the beginning of every episode, James will kind of talk about the new beer we're drinking for that week. Every week it'll be a different one. He'll talk about the brewing process, where it's brewed, some of the flavor notes, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially kind of for beer nerds. The whole idea being that two things, beer and playing role-playing games, tabletop games, they go hand in hand. But a lot of people probably go to the store, grab their pack of Coors Light or Miller Lite, and just that's what they always get. It's what they always drink. So the idea is we are going to help you be better beer nerds. And I say we, I don't know shit about beer. I've been drinking beer this whole time, but it's just beer I like. I don't know if it's good or viewed as good or whatever. So the whole idea being is we want to get people to step outside of their comfort zone, stop buying these same old, nationally brewed beers you see everywhere, and try something different. So after that, we delve into a homebrew topic, whether that is politics or religion or dragons or magic or knights or government. We talk about that kind of loosely. We talk about some examples in popular fiction that we like, and then we spend the next little time, the rest of the podcast, essentially breaking down that idea and applying it to our game world. So you will actually listen as we build our homebrew setting. And periodically, we will be playing a game called Microscope, which if you have not played it, is really amazing. It is a game that has no DM. It's a tabletop game, but everybody plays, and it's a history building game. You essentially start off, the first player will say, we're going to be building the history between the War of the Wild North, between the assassination of the king, and you just make up 2 time periods, and that's the time frame you play in. And then each player can choose to make an event or a character, and you essentially take this book and you go around and you create a history for a time frame. And so we'll be doing that to essentially establish a timeline before our game begins. More or less, the end of every episode, we want people who are listening to know of a cool new beer that they are excited to try, and we'll tell them where to find it, how much it costs, etc. And then the rest of it will essentially be about, here's the idea. If you listen to our podcast, you're going to hear this homebrew, these new aspects start to make their way into our story, and also to inspire other people who do homebrew games to take these ideas and apply it to their own game. So that's the whole premise for the show. Now, the first episode or 2 will probably be available for everyone for a limited time, but this is very much an exclusive thing for our Patreon folks, and I'm not going to sit here and beg people who are watching your show for money. But the way I've got it set up, the minimum pledge amount gets you this show. Pretty much, if you pledge $1 a month, you get all of our bonus shit, and that's everything. That's all I'll say about it. I'm not going to beg for money because I do that during the week, and I'm not going to do it on your show. That's my day job. But essentially, that's the premise. So hopefully, to answer your question, this has inspired me to do something different. James and I are even toying with a comedy podcast. We played with some, but I definitely like the idea. I like recording podcasts. I like producing the content. I think it's fun. So hopefully, time permitting, I'll hopefully be putting out more and more stuff kind of in that vein.
Yeah, I mean that sounds really cool. I know you would probably like talking to 2 of the players on my Exploding Dice show, because I think they used to have a beer related podcast a couple of years ago. It was before I was playing with them, but I know they were talking about it. They used to have it and they had to stop. I know I would I don't know much about beer. The only thing I know about beer is I would love it if someone were to sponsor my show, which means send me case of beer and I drink it, and that's pretty much it. I would also
accept that.
Yeah, no, I don't even care what it is. It doesn't have to be good beer, though. I will make a list of recommendations if anyone's taking any. But no, that's really cool. Ever since I got into streaming, like I've just sort of been I've been trying different things. Like I said, my brother has a comedy podcast, and I just sort of ended up playing characters on that. There was a recurring character that I did on their original podcast called Inside Jokes, and I played this wizard called Brodert Quink, and he was on like 3 different episodes, and it was a lot of fun. It was a character to play, and it's just us sitting around and goofing off and being funny. And then he has a new show, and so I voice a character in that. Like we recorded all these sketches, and so I love just anytime I get a chance to sit in front of in front of a microphone or something and hang out with other people and just goof off for a while, and hopefully it entertains someone somewhere.
Well, I would definitely say that Too Cool for Tabletop was far more influenced by stuff like Comedy Bang Bang or How Did This Get Made than it was by like.
Oh, the Comedy Bang Bang is pretty much like my brother's like, they're his idols basically.
Well, I don't know. It's weird that was what, that is what inspired me to want to podcast. But I didn't really have an idea, and then it occurred to me, hey, we could do role-playing games. I mean, we talked about a little before the show where the whole premise of our show was to sit down and just make entertaining content, and to be funny and goof off. And we would also be playing Dungeons & Dragons, which was mostly for my entertainment because I want to play more. So I don't know, man. I feel like I tried to listen to a bunch of actual play and just tabletop-related podcasts when I first got into podcasting, but not a lot of them held my attention. But the ones that really did were these comedy podcasts. I didn't really feel confident enough in myself to write and produce a comedy podcast, and really I would rather have an excuse to play role-playing games. So I just kind of married those ideas, and it's become this,
Definitely. And you guys should, if you have not already, you should definitely check out the show. For everyone who's been hanging out with us in Twitch, and everyone who will be seeing this on YouTube, which it will be going up to eventually. Since we are coming up on 10 o'clock, and we really, I think we've exhausted all of our questions, and we have pretty much talked about everything that could under the sun. Though there are definitely other role-playing game topics that we could talk about for some more time. We won't keep you guys here because I know you all have busy lives, and I have things that I need to get to. Specifically, I have some details about, before we get out of here, I'm going to tell you guys what you can expect coming up on the Exploding Dice channel, because you've been hanging out with us, and you deserve to know what is coming up in the future. First of all, if you guys don't already know, this show, the Fuzzy Dice Show, runs every Tuesday night right here at 8 p.m. Eastern. I have a different guest every time, hopefully a great show for you. Coming up next week, if you have not heard of them already, I have the director and creator of the Natural 20 Show on YouTube.
I love those guys. Those
my God,
funny, man.
It is
so good.
It's such a good show. If you have not watched it, I would suggest checking it out on YouTube. It's just called Natural 20. The episodes are like 5 minutes long, and they're hilarious.
They're amazing. They're so good. A podcast, a YouTube comedy series about D&D does not deserve to be this funny, but it is hilarious. It's so good.
Well, they are. We're actually planning 2 separate days, because the first day, which is next week, I am hanging out with Dominic Jovena, the director of the Dungeon Master for the group, and then I am still working it out. But hopefully, in the next month, you will see some of the cast members showing up on here. Jack Delaney is a friend of Will and a friend of mine, so hopefully we'll get him out here, and as well as some of the other people. It should be awesome. What else is coming up this month? I've got on this show, I've got the DM's Block podcast, which, if you have not listened to it, fantastic Dungeon Master information, always an entertaining show. They'll be hanging out with us the following week. And then after that, I've got the Saving Throw show. So we've got a really crazy lineup of guests coming up for you in the next month or so. Hopefully you guys show up for it. It is going to be awesome.
I will say that a Saving Throw show, those guys have a great stream. They do, I've watched those quite a bit. It's very fantastic. Yeah, production value is just top notch on their show. And they will be coming to hang out with me, so I will be watching. We made it. That's how you know we made it. So there's that. Also, if you, as I mentioned, Exploding Dice, we stream D&D here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We just started our Out of the Abyss campaign. Our first episode is going up on YouTube tonight, so go check it out or catch the video on demand. You can click the link right up there somewhere. And tune in every Sunday for that. Also,
This week I've got a campaign starting. Reign of Winter is starting on the Encounter Roleplay channel. That's at 1 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/Encounter Roleplay. Go check them out. They're awesome guys. I'll be running a campaign there, as well as reprising a role as Dr. Caesar, the kind of crazy plague doctor who works in a weird horror hospital on their Curse of Strahd campaign. So, a lot of fun there. I think that is all that I've got as far as what is coming up this week. So, as always, thank you guys. Thank you everyone who stopped by to hang out with us. Thank you everyone in chat. Thank you everyone who followed. You guys are awesome. Hopefully you will tune in for some awesome content coming up in the future. And a huge thanks to Mr. Jason Ashley, my guest right here. Thank you for hanging out with me.
Yeah, dude, this was fun. I had a really good time. I'm telling everyone in chat right now that I've had to pee since the beginning. So, like, as I'm talking, I'm like, oh, God, don't pee yourself, don't pee yourself. So I'm really glad to have been on it. But to be honest, I'm glad it's ending because I don't want to pee myself in front of an audience.
No, trust me, I understand. Before I release you from your chair, I just want to, if you want to real quick, just shoot your Twitter website, everything to anyone who's gonna check us out.
I will. Go to my website, www.toocoolfortabletop.com. Anything you want to find about us is there. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook at TCFT Podcast. I will say that I don't know shit about Snapchat, and Madeline's going to have to run it for me because I don't know how it works. But Twitter is where you'll find me most of the time. Find me on Twitter. New episodes every Monday. This coming Monday on Memorial Day, it won't be a regularly scheduled episode because of the holiday, but there's going to be a bonus episode where me and Madeline talk about some backstory and some cool stuff. But if you want to check out our show, start on episode 12. The other episodes are fine, but episode 12 is where the campaign begins. That's where the good shit is. And that's it. That's all I got.
Awesome. Definitely. Thank you guys for, thank you, Jason, for hanging out with me. As always, I am your host, Askren, the host and dungeon master here on the Exploding Dice channel. You can catch me on Twitter, right? It's right down here, at Askren. Send me a message. Say hi. I'll say hi back. That way we'll have interacted. It'll be great. Also, you can follow us here, and you can see whenever we're going live, as well as see I'll be hosting anytime I am appearing or dungeon mastering. So you can always find me whenever I'm playing D&D. Thank you, Jason, for stopping by. I hope, hopefully, we can maybe have you back in the future to talk about more things going on with Too Cool for Tabletop.
Sounds good to me.
I had a great time. Hopefully, you guys did too. As always, thank you for stopping by, and we will see you next week. Take care, guys.
Bye.